got to listen to an interview I did with Daniel McQueen. I was introduced to Daniel through his book, Psychedelic Cannabis, Breaking the Gate. Kind of weird chain of events for me. I was researching cannabis assisted therapy, especially in kind of Holland and Amsterdam, kind of the work they're doing there. And I would hear these accounts of cannabis acting like really surprising in clinical settings, like that even kind of seasoned stoners would enter a cannabis assisted therapy session and be really blown away by the experience. And as someone that like smokes cannabis and grew up smoking a good amount of cannabis, I was really intrigued by this. And then I found that Daniel McQueen had written this book, Psychedelic Cannabis, and when I read it, it actually changed my relationship with cannabis, which I think is like a ringing endorsement, because I've read a lot of books and I don't remember most of the books I read, and most of the things I read didn't stick with me. But this book actually like altered my spirituality, my spiritual practice, and my relationship with a plant that is really dear to me. So I'm really grateful to Daniel and his work, and was also grateful that he was willing to sit down and talk. And I really enjoyed talking to Daniel. He had a sweet nature that I just really appreciated in a kind of playful way. So yeah, enjoy this conversation about psychedelic cannabis and the work Daniel does around that. And yeah, be well and enjoy. Oh, and connect with Daniel at his website, Center for Medicinal Mindfulness. There's a lot of kind of information there and events and different things Daniel's got going on and the community there at large has got going on. And I'd really encourage you to check it out. Come out soon, because April 18th, they're going to have their 10-year anniversary, and they got a lot of in-person and online offerings to kind of celebrate psychedelic cannabis and other kind of psychedelic healing substances, whatever you want to call it, the psychedelic renaissance, whatever, you know? But yeah, they're doing work there and they're making offerings, and you should really check it out, because I do think what Daniel's offering is pretty unique, that there's a legal aid to healing that we're not tapping into while everyone's waiting for these other medicinal supports like MDMA and psilocybin to become legalized for therapy. So I think what Daniel's doing is really kind of letting people know, like, if you want to do the work, you can do it now. And, you know, make sure you have the right support, but you can do it now. Okay, enjoy the conversation. Bye. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Daniel, for coming. I kind of really appreciate getting the chance to sit with you right now. And
happy to be here, Brandon.
Yeah. And I feel like in a weird way, it's a kind of a controversial topic, psychedelic cannabis. Like not just in the not in the wider world, but like in the psychedelic world, it seems kind of controversial. So I'm kind of excited to see where we go.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Before we jump in, can we just like take a little moment, kind of silence, so we can both kind of attune and give other people a chance to settle?
It was nice. I don't think I've ever meditated on a podcast before.
It's usually for my anxiety. It just gives me a moment to like settle another layer, you know?
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I should tell you one of my secrets, my open secrets about working with anxiety and these things. So I'm happy to share.
Oh, please start. Let's start there. What's your secret?
Well, anxiety? I take CBD before things like this. So we have a nano encapsulated CBD product that we use in our therapy. And it's real fast acting, and it just drops your heart rate down, takes the anxiety out of it. Before any presentation, any talk I do, I take CBD.
Kind of how people would use beta blockers, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same thing. I just think it may be a little more effective than that, because it does more than just affect your heart.
Okay.
But they did a study where they found that audience members paid attention more if you take CBD.
Oh, really? Yeah. Like if you're more grounded,
more contact. Yeah. Of course, now I'm setting myself up to.
I mean, it's not. None of these things are perfect, right? I mean, yeah. So I was thinking, just like in that moment too, of like myself growing up, I grew up in Southern California, and I was like skateboarding and in the water, and like being a stoner was just like part of that life. And then
Mhm.
when I like I don't know, started taking a transformational path in my 20s, I got really into Zen and retreats and kind of purity and clean living. Um and then like a decade later, like this idea of psychedelic cannabis started popping up for me. And it was kind of like a shock, you know, from growing up as a stoner, like smoking
Uh-huh.
bongs and cars and not feeling like I
Uh-huh.
had a really healthy relationship with the plant, to like this whole other layer of potential that was there. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering for you, like, could you share a little bit of like how you started to tap into that and discover that, and like even
Hmm.
before you started kind of offering it to others?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can, I grew up in the South, so very different
Yeah.
upbringing than you. And I didn't start smoking until, right before college, I guess. So I was a little late in the game. I loved it, from the very beginning. I thought it was a wonderful experience, very uplifting and lighthearted and creative, playful, so
Oh.
and I think even then, it had like, that was those moments of deeper insight or curiosity, exploration. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was always something that was intriguing to me. So it's been a part of my life for a long time. And I was part of different underground psychedelic communities and things, and more on a spiritual space. And cannabis was just part of the culture, you know. But I think I saw there was some constraints or lack of balance in some of just the purely spiritual models. And so I went and started studying psychotherapy and psychology, and that's how I got to Naropa. That was about 10 years at the beginning, from my journey. And at Naropa, I started using cannabis as a meditation tool. And I would
Mm-hmm.
stretch and meditate and stretch. And I started to have like little flashes of inner visual experiences and such. Um, but I never really got it. I never really connected the two, cannabis as a psychedelic. I think there's this introject or belief system that's pretty deeply ingrained in our culture, around like not accepting it for what it really is.
I was thinking about that too, just like everyone that has smoked a little weed has had a pretty intense experience. And it's like
But
it seems weird.
you don't equate it to a psychedelic state,
No, no,
right?
no. It's like, oh, a bad trip. I'm like, that's
But
because that's
it's
a psychedelic.
yeah, right. A bad trip proves the
Oh,
point.
yeah.
you know,
Oh.
yeah.
So, so you're at Naropa and you kind of haven't connected the two yet.
I haven't connected the two yet. I think there's this introject of what cannabis is, these belief systems that minimize it. Plus, Colorado legalized it was medically legal before 2014, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it legalized in 2014. So the quality of the cannabis from when I was a kid, when we were kids, to now is like, it's a different plant, like, so it just has we have greater access to cleaner states, that are less stony.
Yeah, yeah.
um so I went to Naropa, and with my interest, sorry about that, let me turn this off.
Oh, no worries.
With my interest, I was going to be a psychedelic facilitator. That's why I went.
You were looking to go into the underground kind of and have the training though to do that a bit, or what
Yeah, I
was your
wanted to be an
sense?
ethical guide, right? I wanted to have real training, but that was like either underground work or research was just starting, and
Mm-hmm.
MDMA assisted psychotherapy, and MAPS was just getting going at that time. Like they had
Yeah.
been working for decades by that
Yeah,
point,
for
but
working forever to get to that point
to
where
get
they
to
can
that
start
point, but
one.
yeah, the first MAPS conferences were there and stuff. So the two options were underground or research. And I was getting married and having kids, and this idea of underground wasn't fitting anymore, for 1,000 different reasons. Plus, I really like to talk about this shit. So,
Yeah, like to
um,
have a secret life, sort of.
yeah,
Uh,
that didn't work very well for me, So a friend of mine, after I graduated, it's like a year or two after I graduated, I was starting to teach classes on psychedelic harm reduction and how to sit for your friends and things. And a friend of mine suggested I consider working with cannabis as a tool. And I was like, I never considered it, John. And he's like, well, it's a psychedelic, right? And I was like, Yeah, I guess so. It is, isn't it? And so I had this intuition to blend different strains together from the very
So that was
beginning.
early for you, the kind of blending of
Yeah,
strains.
I just like intuitively, I knew what the difference of sativas and hybrids. I'm like, what will happen if we just mix all this shit together? And the first few sessions, people were jokingly accusing me of putting DMT in the blend.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe we should look at this after just those
Was
first few
this with the friends, or where were you sort of experimenting with?
Yeah, we did a couple of circles, like initial circles, in my living room. 4 or 6 people laying there in a circle, playing music. I created this little intentional and smoking ceremony and guided meditation, and just invited people to lie down and play music for them. And then from there, we created some workshops, and even then it was like all day workshops where I explained what we were doing, and then we would do a journey. And then I just started stripping all the stuff we didn't need out of the
there was
program.
Kind of using all the things you'd learned in Europa and through your kind of studies, and then how to like parse it down to the essentials.
Yeah, exactly. So it's mindfulness based, so it's skill set oriented. With cannabis, we have a lot more agency in these inner spaces than other psychedelic medicines. So you can practice mindfulness and focused awareness and relaxation of tension and things like that. And then I'm transpersonally oriented. I got my master's in transpersonal counseling, so
and like
Gestalt.
for those that don't know, could you speak a little to what transpersonal is and the psychology?
Yeah, so transpersonal was named by Stan Groff, who's as the field of psychology to study psychedelics, and that meant altered states of consciousness, growth edge consciousness, so it's like an umbrella of spiritual study of spiritual practices and the effects of psychology. And then just honoring that all altered states aren't always psychosis, like there's a lot more to it than that.
His kind of phrase, a holotropic, right, of like more moving towards health and wholeness.
Yeah, super essential. Like that's one of my holotropic principles, one of my guiding concepts in our practices, because we see it all the time.
And but you say see it all the time, kind of seeing how what comes up when working with cannabis or other medicines too, like is moving towards a holotropic kind of healing process, but like maybe at times it's hard to see in the middle of it.
Well, I often reflect in the sessions that this is what healing looks like, and sometimes it's really weird looking. People are shaking or crying or having a moment of anxiety, or they're having like extreme memory recall, or they're flying through the cosmos and just convulsing and stuff. Like healing, like there's a broad range of what normal healing looks like, and that's the holotropic principle. It's just the body, psyche, mind doing what it needs to do to resolve some tension or come to some greater, deeper realization. And it's just a natural. It's like in our genetics. It's like we can't help ourselves if we put ourselves in the right context.
You give yourself the right space, your healing is going to unfold, it seems.
And I've come to the conclusion that healing and self-actualization are really just one thing. It's the same process. It's a continuum, or a spectrum where we first turn towards healing and letting go of things, but it's the same process to turn towards what we're called to live into and who we're becoming.
Like the letting go and the cultivation.
Letting go and cultivate. So all these polarities are hidden within the work.
So you're doing circles with friends, you're doing workshops, and like where does it kind of grow from there?
That was so we're coming up our 10-year anniversary as a community in a program, and then about 2 years into it, cannabis became legal. So I started working with doing circles. We call them conscious cannabis circles, and I'd facilitate group psychedelic experiences for the local community here in Boulder. Some would be 12 people, some would be 30,
That's a lot of, how many, like, do you have assistants when you're doing 30, or is it just you?
Oh
That's
yeah. Yeah, we have
that's
extra
a lot of people.
sitters. Yeah, we have extra sitters and a protocol in case somebody has to, take a break from the room and stuff. But cannabis is pretty, like, again, because we retain our agency, we have there's just a lot of safety and support. It's something that people can manage in a group experience pretty well.
Yeah.
And started started really learning how to work with the medicine and how long are the cycles of the journey sessions and all of that. And within that space, I think over a period of several years, I did this for every month for years. And we brought breath work into the program, started doing breath work circles. Then we started combining cannabis and breath work to see what happened there. And those were pretty intense. And then I started to see the trauma resolution capacity that the medicine, like, people were describing resolution of trauma in their experiences. I was seeing the energetic discharge,
the shaking,
trembling, like the shivering and things, and so and then people started asking me for one-on-one sessions.
Okay, so
I
you kind of
play with that.
Yeah. How was that? Was that different? Does that feel different in the group space versus the one-on-one?
Yeah, the primary difference, like in a group space, it's more of a sitting practice, meditation and holding space and being present in case somebody needs you. More like an ayahuasca journey. Everybody's kind of in their own experience.
Yeah, sort of holding the wider container.
Yeah,
noticing if there's specific need in that moment.
Just tending it. With in individual sessions. They can be way more interactive. They're more like MDMA assisted psychotherapy sessions or something.
So you're going more interactive, less sort of in the psilocybin blindfold model,
well, both. And so some people on cannabis just can't talk, right? Like, so they're more like, it's more like
that's not my problem.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So right. So you turn it inward, it's like sometimes it's like a ketamine or DMT trip. The person's quiet, they're in another reality, they come back and you share. And then other times cannabis will morph between that and more of a collaborative guided meditation of consciousness. And and like a lot of the similar skill sets and strategies of trauma resolution and MDMA assisted therapies are like right there. The same stuff is happening.
Can you speak to that a little bit, like what you're drawing on when you're in a more interactive space with people that are coming to you?
Yeah, so I was I was one of the first to get trained by MAPS as an MDMA guide. This was like back in the day, before I even graduated from Naropa. The second study, besides Michael and Annie's Mythoverse study, is it North Carolina, South Carolina?
I'm not a science guy, so I see you looking at me. I'm like,
yeah, I don't know. A second site was being formed here in Boulder. And so I was gearing up for that. My wife had the opportunity to be a guide in that experience for a while. So there's this reconsolidation of memory that occurs in MDMA assisted psychotherapy where you not to get into the neurology, but
it's okay. Go where you want, man. Go where you want.
Okay. Well, a pathway opens up in the brain that allows for memories that were too difficult to look at when they were like an experience when it was happening. We dissociate, and that memory has to go somewhere, right? And so instead of going through the frontal cortex and resolving, it gets stuck in our brain stem, and
hence the shaking and everything, right?
That's and that's what causes PTSD symptomology. It's just like your hoses are kinked up inside, and you start building pressure. So what happens with MDMA is that mechanism gets open just enough for the reconsolidation of memory to occur. So the person remembers what happened, and in some cases it can be so extreme they are reliving it.
Yeah, like a full immersion experience.
Like a flashback, but imagine in a contained setting that helps resolve it as opposed to just re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
And so, but that's just one way it's doing it. So you have a neurological resolution occurring through memory recall, but there's also a big emotional experience that's unfolding. So all those stuck emotions start to release. And then the shaking occurs, like the body needed to do something that it couldn't,
if it needed to run or hit,
fight, flight, like
Mhm.
get unfrozen, basically,
Totally.
literally we're thawing people out in these
Yeah.
places. And so facilitating it is just supporting a person turning towards what's moving through them, relaxing around it so that it can resolve, move through and resolve. And usually there's some sort of deep understanding, reframing of the experience, greater clarity and acceptance. Some sort of gift occurs as
That sort
part
of
of that.
meaning level where like new
Yeah.
meaning emerges from it.
New meaning, understanding why it happened,
Yeah.
Understanding how you grew from it, things like that. And so cannabis does the exact same thing as MDMA. Pretty confident being able to say that right now. So it's a psychedelic. Cannabis is a psychedelic. It creates intervisual experiences and altered states like psilocybin or DMT, ayahuasca. I've had LSD trips on cannabis.
It can have like a tryptamine like quality to
Oh,
it.
totally. And it is affecting those receptors, the
Mhm.
5-HT2A receptors or something. That's why there's a correlation between cannabis use and schizophrenia.
Oh.
So because it is affecting those receptors, but it's also an empathogen. It's like a plant-based MDMA. So there's something about that that's really amazing. And
can you help clarify there that kind of psychedelic and empathogen difference?
Yeah, pathogen like MDMA, it's like more access to empathy and your emotional experience. It also, directly impacts this brain memory reconsolidation piece, and it creates a general sense of safety and support so that you can turn towards difficult material without freaking out.
That kind of combined effect of like the empathogen and the psychedelic, like bringing up material in the way a psychedelic does, but then having that support to
having the support. And sometimes some pathogens like MDMA aren't visual, but if you add a psychedelic with it, the memories might become more visual, or you're flying through like an inner imaginal
more
realm.
immersive and more sort of
it's just
psyche producing.
Ego dissolution, it's more of a psychedelic. Pathogens don't generally cause like ego dissolution and death
in a weird way where you're like okay with your ego, so it doesn't feel like as big of a deal.
Right. And I'm cool with my ego. I think we should all be cool with our egos. But there's one more piece I'd like to share, because this is like new realization for me, and that so we have cannabis as a psychedelic and pathogen. And I'm coming up with a term, playing with different words for it, but I think I'm landing on endelic.
Like can you spell it out?
Endelic. Another word might be endodelic, but that sounds a little weird. But like endocannabinoid system, cannabis directly impacts the endocannabinoid system. And what that basically means is it's getting into your physical tissue, your muscles and tendons and fascia, connectivity, in the body. And and as it affects the endocannabinoid system, what it does is it just relaxes everything a little bit. So imagine you've been holding a tension in your body as long as you can remember. It's associated with a traumatic experience. So we'll turn towards it, relax around it. It will open up and physically relax. Your body will start shaking. And then people will have an emotional discharge and a memory recall as they're flying through the cosmos. And
you can see the patterns, like the sort of pattern of healing that occurs when you bring attention to the tension, and then the cannabis supporting the tension kind of expressing itself.
That's right. Yeah, it's physically letting the body relax. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a unique characteristic as a psychedelic. It's like it's because it's directly impacting the physical tissue.
Yeah, and that's the importance of I can't remember the word right now.
Indelic.
Endelic, yeah, like
Yeah.
the endelic quality, that it's very muscularly based.
Yeah, tendon, muscles, tissue, even in the tensions in our organs and things like that, will start to release. And for whatever reason, like it feels like the experience feels like the memory is coming out of that spot in the body. But I think there's just some sort of synesthesia of memory recall and a familiar physical felt sense. Like if you got punched in the shoulder and got hurt, right? Like remembering that difficult memory, like getting in a fight or whatever, you would feel the pain in your shoulder, right? There's a synesthesia occurring or something there.
I don't want to go too much in the weeds, but I want to stay with something you're saying, because
Sure.
I think in the kind of trauma world, there's a sense of memory, right? Experience being what we block out, and that's why it gets frozen. But like for me too, as like a psychotherapist, and I do Reichian work, so everything you're
body
talking right
armor.
now,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
But like emotions too, right? If we have an experience that has an emotional tone that we, for some reason, can't hold that emotion, right? That gets sort of blocked too.
Yeah.
And like it's not just big experiences, but like anger, sometimes sadness, grief, like disgust, right? Like if they're big enough, we're just going to cut them off, and they're going to sort of
all that gets stuffed somewhere in the body.
Yeah, there's some residual hanging out that's going to happen.
Yeah. So whatever. So again, resolution and the holotropic principle, whatever you were suppressing, avoiding, not engaging, has to be turned towards for resolution and healing. And so that means letting yourself feel what you didn't allow yourself to feel previously, right?
Yeah. And remember or feel.
Yeah. Remember and feel. Yeah, absolutely. And that there's a natural there's a natural healing process. If we allowed ourselves to do that in the moment, then we wouldn't be holding on to so much, and we wouldn't be as mentally unwell or psychologically unwell. So that's what we do. We create these little containers for people to have these resolution release experiences, and cannabis is a great resource to do that with. It's totally legal here, and it's incredibly effective.
So. And have you found it smooth, kind of, because you're a legitimate business, right? I could go on a website and schedule sessions, and like, how is the legal process of kind of?
It's evolved over the years. Used to do this work in my home. We used to be cannabis could only be used in a home space, so and so I had a really beautiful meditation space in my home, and the laws changed here enough that we got we have 2 suites here, actually. So one suite has 4 psychedelic therapy spaces and some offices, and then I have a group space over here on my side, so I can do groups with cannabis or ketamine, and we have permission from the owner, and as these are psychedelic sessions are as private of an event as one can get, so so with permission of the owner and using special vaporizers instead of pipes, we're just learn to navigate the constraints and legal regulations as best we can.
That seems like what you kind of, right, when you first started, not wanting to be underground, right? Like how to navigate this to make it work for you. And like, it seems like you're keeping on doing that.
And it's like the universe is responsive to it. Like the world gives, like, we step into something, we do the best we can in the constraints we have. And then once we figure that piece out, then we'll have like another opportunity opens up, and so it almost feels like, co-creating a reality of living into possibilities of legal psychedelic medicine work. And so now, like, even so, when we got started, these weren't even on the table, but it was always possible. We always considered it possible, but now there are ballot measures to legalize psilocybin in Colorado and your area.
Oregon, we had more towards the medical kind of legalization. I mean, everything's been decriminalized, so it's a little different, but
Denver here's been decriminalized. It's not quite level that we need to work with it, but people are starting to open it up. So So for us, it's just an issue of like adding a subpage for a new specialty. Like we have a lot of
Yeah.
experience facilitating these now.
Yeah, like while people have been doing research and kind of doing that, you've been just doing the work
Figuring
of,
out how to run a clinic around it.
yeah,
They're
because like,
ketamine clinics and stuff, but we're a psychedelic clinic that uses ketamine, right? As opposed to like a
mhm.
medical clinic.
Yeah, you're not just going into the chair, having the
Mhm.
IV in, right? I don't actually know what it's like. I just picture a
Yeah, well,
pretty medical,
that's exactly what it's like.
sterile
People,
environment
uh-huh.
for it. Yeah.
A buzzer comes off and they unhook you and send you home, even if
Oh
you're
my
not
God.
ready.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. We sit and breathe and play
Yeah.
beautiful music and offer
Yeah, probably
snacks
probably have a
afterwards.
room you can go to after if
Oh
you need
yeah,
to
we got
unwind.
multiple lazy boys and
Yeah.
mats and
Yeah. It
so
makes me think of Stan Groff, and I've heard him describe his vision, right? Like as things change, where like one clinic can hold all these spaces, whether it's holotropic breath work or kind of non-chemical means of accessing
mhm,
holotropic states, or all the other sort of varieties, and that it's like
mhm.
one house and you could kind of
Yeah,
navigate through that, with
yeah.
the help of a guide that understands like maybe this is helpful for this,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah, so holotropic, ongoing. So, like if like for the psychotherapists and the people who work that way, ongoing support's really essential. We have a medical doctor, so we have to have a certain and there's so much back end work, the waivers and keeping it all legal, so creating a little bit larger than a private practice structure really
mm-hmm.
helps. We wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to hire a doctor for my own practice, but it's there is like a certain threshold we have to reach to make that happen. So groups, private sessions. We work with non-clinical people, concerns. So, I have 2 ministers on staff, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
we have like psychotherapists on staff.
Do
So
you
really not
do you support
pathologizing.
kind of the post process, the integration
Yeah,
process, and like further care or further support?
yeah,
Like,
it's like it's required. We have
okay,
so like I do 2-day intensives with cannabis, like 2 back-to-back sessions, 2 days in a row. And the preparation, at least one, but multiple preparation sessions, and at least one, but multiple post sessions. It's all scheduled at once,
yeah,
and we don't, like we just make sure it's a required part of the protocol.
yeah,
Because a lot can happen in those integration sessions where you're unpacking it and making sure the person's good, in a good space.
yeah.
I think
Because
it's really important.
I'll do psychedelic integration work mostly with clients I already have if they're sort of exploring on their own, and it's amazing what's available. Like those first few sessions
Oh yeah, and
after, like it feels like a tag team wrestling almost, where like a lot happened with the psychedelic medicine, but then it's like when I'm with them, there's just it feels more open to be with
mm,
it, that difficulty, and let it further evolve for the
mm,
person. So
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like that. And also like the prep that you did with your clients, what created the preconditions for them to turn towards whatever it was. And then there's some sort of breakthrough right in
yeah.
the journey session. So you're just in a new place afterwards with
And
them.
then the recall, like I have some clients years later, I'll like, oh, remember that mushroom experience? Like this
Mm,
just sounds like you're still struggling with that thing you
mm,
open there. Like, oh, I'm really defined by rules and like becoming
uh-huh.
so clear of that. But it's
It's
not like
just continue
not
unfolding.
like you
Yeah.
have a psychedelic experience where you're like, oh, I'm no longer bound by rules. It's like quite a journey to learn how to kind of live beyond
Mm,
that.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a fallacy in the practice to think that we can just transcend our problems and be done with them. It takes a lot of work to resolve this stuff outside of the medicine sessions, but the medicine work is what makes it possible, though, right? Like that's what I think
Yeah, you're
is the most
talking about
important.
kind of untangling the hose, right? Like
Uh-huh.
allowing the flow of experience to
Sometimes we
start.
need an intervention,
Yeah.
and it's like a physiological intervention, and or psychic intervention. There's something that like it's like psychedelics seem to like speed up our evolutionary process. They make us move through something quicker than we would otherwise.
Yes. Yeah. They
So
seem to they have a creativity in bypassing the normal sort of linearity, it seems.
Right. Well, when you pop into like a higher dimensional awareness, it's like you see your whole life holistically.
Yeah, like living lifetimes in 5 hours. You're having
Lifetimes and
a
lifetime.
lot of experience.
Yeah, man.
You know?
Like that's like a lot to process.
Yeah.
You know, it's like for me when I, you know, like I haven't taken DMT in years, and it was always the implications of the experience more than the experience itself that was like created the existential.
I've never taken pure DMT in that way, but what you're talking about, I've heard from so many people like, what is this? If this can
if
happen
this is
DMT,
real,
yeah, then what is the rest of this?
Yeah, what does that imply about reality? Yeah, man. I mean, like some of these are like it's gonna be unpacking for our whole lifetimes. You know?
Totally. Like some experiences they just kind of continue to give, it seems. Yeah. So one thing that I really, because before coming on your work, I also I think looking at some of the work in Amsterdam with cannabis assisted therapy, this like notion of cannabis being really like flexible in how it meets you. Like whether you want to like, for me, like get stoned and go to the beach, you know, versus like sit down and have like a medicine experience. It seems like it'll honor both those. And like that it really responds to the intention in quite a dramatic way, it feels almost.
Yeah.
Like I've heard accounts of folks saying like that's not cannabis, like you said, like did you give me DMT, right? Like
yeah, or MDMA. It can feel just like MDMA. I've had experiences just like peyote, just like psilocybin. So even 5-MeO DMT, people have described experiences on cannabis that are just
like sort of more impersonal,
most
kind
extreme.
of. Yeah.
So I've sat with this a lot. There's a strain of cannabis for every function we'd ever want or need, you know. So like think of cannabis as a plural instead of a singular medicine. That there's THC in it, but then with the entourage effect and the other cannabinoids and the terpene profiles, the THC is like a booster rocket, but the terpenes and other things are like your navigational system.
Yeah, they're sort of guiding the nuance of the experience.
Yeah, like there's some straight physiological effects like relaxation, like something that smells like a cannabis strain that smells like lavender is going to chill you out, you know. A one that smells like pine needles or lime or lemons are going to really like light you up and activate you. So if you want to do something or energetic, like you said, like go to the beach and surf, you know, maybe you're going to take a sativa. If you want to hang out, watch a movie and relax after work, maybe an indica or hybrid, right? And that so the strains are specific, like the strains or like you got to match your intention with the right strains. You know, if you're like taking a medicine to help you sleep and you're trying to work on that, you're just not going to be that functional, you know. And so like with these blends that I made, they're a combination of different strains, and what happens then is that the medicine itself just shows up how you need it to in these
so you're sort of like offering the kind of the continuum of what the sativa or the cannabis can kind of bring.
We put it all into like one image
and let the intelligence of the sort of ceremony go where it needs to go.
It's like whatever terpene you need, it's right there. And then the mind and the psyche unlocks what they need, right? Like it, again, the holotropic principle, whatever's there to wake up and heal is going to be right there. And then the medicine will match it. So if you need more of a psilocybin journey experience, you go into a psilocybin journey. If you need more of an MDMA trauma resolution like experience, it acts just like MDMA, or it'll weave in, but it'll be different like different medicines, different times of the journey.
It can flow and it's not sort of one thing.
So it's a shapeshifter, you know, like it's I call it the mini, like when we make the blends, we call it making many spirits one. It's like it'll shapeshift into what you're needing in that moment. Whereas like if you take psilocybin, you're not going to have an MDMA trip really, right? Like with cannabis though, you can start out having an MDMA like journey, go into psilocybin, maybe you do a little circular breathing and you're popping into DMT spaces, come back into an MDMA space, and then close the circle, you know, close the session.
I don't think a lot of people believe this.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Like I didn't believe, like trusted its like shape-shifting capacity a bit. But I think I was reading your book and I was on a trip to Nicaragua, like a surf trip. And I wasn't even like ready yet to like let me do a full blend and ceremony. I was just like sitting on a porch, smoking a spliff, and then like had a candle lit and I just laid down and just like drifted into a real sort of ayahuasca-esque space, which I think
Yeah.
was available too, being in the jungle, like
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So
But
set
I
and
was
setting
yeah,
obviously
and it
makes it.
wasn't like an overwhelming one, but like a sort of soft feeling of the
Mhm.
jungle and the same quality I would maybe
Yeah.
taste on ayahuasca. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, Daniel's not full of shit.
Yeah. 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 So you just like, if you want to even have a stronger ayahuasca journey, just take more cannabis, right?
Well,
Like,
I was in
it's dose
Nicaragua.
specific.
It was
Mhm.
hard to get good
Yeah.
cannabis.
Yeah. 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 No, I've been called full of shit before. One time
Yeah.
somebody called me a commercializing shit peddler,
Come
because I was just trying to claim that cannabis is a psychedelic,
and like this
there's just
is
these introjects, these belief
yes,
systems, war on
even
drug shit.
in the psychedelic culture, like
And even, especially in some corners of the psychedelic culture, like ayahuasca folks, well, can't, you have to take breaks from cannabis, to
yeah.
do it right. You have to cleanse from it. And there are other ayahuasca communities that bring it into the circles.
Yeah.
So we get that a lot.
Even like Rick Doblin with MAPS, right? Kind of, I've heard him say that he sees it as symptom relief only.
Yeah. So again, man, like the cannabis is different than it was 10 years ago. So symptom management, really great. So again, there's a strain for everything. In regular use of cannabis, there's legitimate reasons to use daily. That's why people have medical cards. And so, but it doesn't have to be just for symptom management. It can be to get to the core injuries, to heal them. And then at any time you're checking in with what somebody's saying, you always want to assess where they're coming from and what agendas they have, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a legitimate question mark for Rick Doblin and other people in the psychedelic community. They're advocates for specific medicine and why it's
Yeah,
the best.
medicine and model too, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's fine. There's like, think of cannabis as part of a pantheon of medicines, and they're all helpful, they're all useful.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, so we recognize that research is essential, but it's because of the way the laws were and the FDA DEA monopoly on cannabis with this shitty Mississippi
Yeah.
weed.
Yeah, it's
there's
very hard to get good cannabis for
there's
studies,
no
right?
way that
Yeah.
this would work on that medicine. I've seen pictures of it. It looks like pine needles. And
Yeah.
but now that DEA blockade is lifting, and we're coordinating with 6 different research teams to
Oh.
prove, 1, cannabis is a psychedelic, and 2, it can be used as a therapeutic
Well,
tool.
what would be that definition there? If like you're in the scientific community and wanting to prove that cannabis is a psychedelic, what are the kind of qualifiers or things they're looking for?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of scales, rating scales. The most commonly used one is called the Mystical Experience Questionnaire.
Yeah, I've used that one in the
Yeah.
past in research.
Yeah. So what you would do is just, and there's different different characteristics of that.
So is that what they're kind of going with in the academic community? Like if it creates mystical experience, that's a psychedelic?
Yes. Yeah. Well, again, there's some cultural issues with just mystical experience. And Rick Strassman has another scale, and he talks about this idea, like the Zen no mind oneness state is somehow more spiritual than a deity, like being in contact with like a personified deity. And that's just like not quite congruent,
Well, yeah, there's that like especially with that movement towards the east that happened in a lot of the transpersonal circles, right? That
and I went to Naropa,
impersonal is the highest, right?
Impersonal is
personal deification or personal divinity, like not so good. Like you don't want to be talking to things or have praying, right? Or
yeah. So Rick Strassman would say that there's some anti-Semitism in that, like a judgment of like one value, one religious worldview is greater than another, and that's like that's a legit question, but so what you can do though is you can compare cannabis to all the other research studies that have used the MEQ.
just compare
the stats.
Yeah, you just do the sessions, give the questionnaire, and then like, does it have a similar sort of?
They've done that. Mitch Earlywine did it, and he did it just survey, mystical experience survey. This is people just smoking their own whatever they've got, and he found that it approached the level of psilocybin. And we're going to be working with Mitch and other researchers, and we're going to put it with the right blend and the right setting, and then compare that to psilocybin. And our preliminary research indicates that it's stronger.
What is stronger in what way? I mean, stronger in experience, stronger in healing, stronger in impact, sort of.
All of the characteristics. I have it somewhere. I don't know if I can share a screen with you. Well, there's different characteristics like empathy, connection, awareness, ego, disillusion, and then even some negative traits that are similar, that are like anxiety, are real low. But all of the effects of cannabis in this case study are higher than the research on MDMA, ketamine, and psilocybin. It's like over the top. And this, again, super preliminary, but but it's congruent with my experience. It's more like DMT.
I get kind of frustrated and saddened a bit as we're talking, like because I get people that reach out to me all the time for I'm a therapist, right? They just like, can we do psychedelic work? You're in Oregon, you know what I mean? Out of state people emailing me. And I don't advertise as such. I think people are just really thirsty. And I think part of that's like the research kind of making it seem like it'll be a one-time solution, which like you're talking about, right? It's work to kind of work through these things. But like if there's cannabis available and the possibility of kind of doing this, it seems
like we should ethically obligated to say something.
How do you make sense
be on
like
podcast and spread the word as much as we can?
Thank you.
70% of the U.S. population can legally do this. All of Canada, we don't have to wait for any other laws to take place. The psychedelic renaissance is already possible.
And this seems to tie into the medical model a bit too, right? Like a lot of emerging psychedelic assisted psychotherapies are in a clinic, right? Even if they're blindfolded and music based, as a therapist sitting with you. And I think for you, like in the transpersonal spaces early on, that wasn't how it was. Like a sitter model was a
community thing, like, can we get the healing out of the monopoly of psychotherapy?
Can your like when I've done psilocybin assisted therapy myself, just to see what it's like following kind of the different research models, like I have my wife sit with me, and maybe like you're talking skill set, I have some skills from like years of meditating and stuff, but I think most folks don't need a trained professional to sit there for 5 hours. They could have a close friend, as long as there's some supports there.
I'd say, get some orientation into the space, like, so we have a training program where we teach people how to sit for each other as friends and things. So there's some good knowledge there, but
don't just sit like, I'm just going to sit for you. Like there should be some training. If you're doing
it for healing, if somebody's really struggling, then you're going to maybe want somebody there that knows how to like support them if they're really struggling.
So there's a distinction here. Like there are times when that more trained clinical space can be really beneficial depending on what you're needing healing from.
But the contained session model, it's for healing, but it's also for deep transformational growth edge work. Like there's just little things you can say here or there, or know the territory to support someone going deep, going deeper. But with that being said, psychedelics have been used for thousands of years outside of this monopoly of the little room with your guide or our therapist. And there is a very legitimate space to not pathologize or medicalize these medicines. So we come from like, we have these multiple polarities in our program. Like I said, we work with ministers. We have celebratory events in our program. And then we have other and certain waivers for that. And then we have the clinical side where a medical evaluation is required and additional therapeutic support and stuff. And it's just about putting the people in the right container so that they stay safe. But yeah, like people use these medicines all the time. But I'm a fan. Like I believe psychedelic therapy is a real skill set, like almost akin to like emergency medicine or something. You know, like you really need to know how to handle certain things.
Yeah, there is some intensity, and there are some things you're going to encounter in that space that can be
yeah,
unsettling, or like not
super,
settling, like,
yeah.
but unstabilizing even for yourself if you're not able to kind of ground and be receptive.
So my biggest complaint about ketamine clinics, like the typical medical model ketamine clinic, is sometimes these people, even on when they start with low doses, they'll have some sort of breakthrough experience. And they can, in like the medical model, they consider that a crisis. They shut it down, and oftentimes they'll send the person home. In our space, we're looking for those moments as breakthrough experiences. We allow them to unfold. We stay with the process, and there's resolution and completion around it. You know, so that those moments that are sometimes shut down when they're not understood are the most important healing moments of a person's life. And
like some of the limitation of the medical model and not understanding what's emerging. Like, what do you, when you see breakthrough experiences, what type of things do you see that kind of send that sort of like, oh, this is a breakthrough that needs to be supported? Like, what are you witnessing there?
Some sort of emotional release, you know, so sobbing, like deep grief is finally like acknowledged and understood and felt in the room. So the person's, you know, like sobbing, or they're having what's called they get flooded. That pressure valve I'm telling about, sometimes there's so much stuff in there, it just pops open. And all of a sudden, they remember everything all at once. And if somebody's going through, like, if somebody's had some hard times, that can create real concern for personal safety, you know, like their safety and stuff. So you have to support the person through that whole process of remembering. And eventually that pressure, it's like any sort of hose that's been kinked up. At some point, it'll release and slow down. And the person all of a sudden feels like they've lost 1,000 pounds of emotional baggage and such. And so, you know, they might be shaking, like convulsing, like they're having a seizure, you know. And if you don't know if you don't know that's normal, then you might want to stop it or
like
interfere.
You're speaking in the medical kind of ketamine clinics, like
it's like, so
taking them off the ketamine and giving them maybe another drug to calm them down or something.
Yeah, well, or turn off the IV, you know. Like they have these they do low dose ketamine administration. Maybe there's music playing. They're left in a chair by themselves. Sometimes a TV's on, you know, and they're doing 6-session series, to heal depression. But ketamine's a psychedelic, and so all of a sudden, like, the person is just breathing, just sitting there, and all of a sudden their ego completely dissolves, and they freak out, or they tap into a memory, and it's not in contained space for it to be supported. So they freak out, and then the nurses come in, turn off the IV, calm them down, and sometimes send them home before they're even completely through it. So I have some real concerns around that. I guess that's why we're chatting about it, you know. So in our space, we would just be there to let it unfold, stay with it, and it will resolve on its own. It will move through, you know. So it's a missed opportunity at the very least.
So when we kind of rescheduled a couple times, and I think the first time we were going to interview, I made a blend. Luckily, I had some CBN strong weed.
Oh, cool.
Some that I grew that was just sitting there for a year. That it was a little too much of a rocket ship for me. So I'm like, oh, this might be good for the. And I remember, I think I just did it on like a Wednesday night, like set the space, set intention. And it was like a work night at 11 o'clock at night. And then I, consumed the cannabis and laid down. And I had this moment of sort of being like, oh, fuck, this is way more than I thought it was going to be. Like not in a like, oh my God, I can't hang, but like, oh, it's cannabis. I can smoke some weed. I can smoke some weed at night and like have an experience and go to work tomorrow, which I did, but it was way more of an experience than I was like preparing for. And you kind of speak of agency and control in it, but I also want to acknowledge it. Like it can be very potent experience.
Yeah, just because you're, so agency means our ability to skillfully respond to something, not necessarily control it, right?
Yeah, doesn't mean it's a mellow thing you're
no,
responding
it's
to
not
it.
mellow at all. Like I've been, like, I call it getting captured by the medicines. Like it's like it'll pop a process, it'll just pop it open, and sometimes you just have to run with it. One time I did that. This was in a training session. I was doing an online training, and that night I smoked a little herb to relax, and I took a little CBN to help me sleep. CBN's a good sleep medicine. And then I was surfing the web on my phone and watched something on YouTube that I should not have watched. It was like emotionally, like it was like should have had a warning or something on it. It was like an abusive situation, and it activated a deep process in me. Triggered a deep process and flooded, like it all of a sudden it just lit my whole body up, and I was having images of past life experiences, resolution of deep trauma. It was hyper visual, like DMT. It was like deep access to my memories, like MDMA, and I was in that process for like 4 or 5 hours, like through the middle of the night before I could move.
And like did you catch that at some point where you're like, I need to shift how I'm relating to the space? Like did you kind of change your environment a bit to meet that? Like how was
well
that?
I was already lying in bed and stuff. So, I was like I quit watching the YouTube. I was like, man,
no like more surfing
it was
the internet.
So triggering to me. It was so triggering, and I just had to stay with it. It just, like, it was gripping my heart, and I had to breathe with it. And, so and I had the skill sets and tools. I just stayed with it and let it move through. But it was a real deep process, and took me in one way it sounds
beautiful. The kind of, like, it sounds like you were able to work through a lot there, but also in a kind of way you weren't ready for.
Well, just not planning,
ready in that. I mean, ready for in the big picture, but
but karmically, I think it made a lot of sense, because this was the class where we talk about a lot of trauma and listening to hard stories, and I was doing my best to prepare people and do an informed consent and before we talked about difficult stories. But even still, it was a really hard, triggering experience for me and other people, my students and stuff. And then that night I got a taste of my own medicine. Like I got, like, because I was talking about sometimes these stories with your clients just come out of the blue, like they didn't even know they were there, and you got to be ready for it. And stay in contact with your breath, not dissociate yourself. Move it through your system too. And so I got a total taste of my own medicine in that experience. And so it was totally relevant and very perfect and extremely difficult and surprising,
So and I hadn't thought about this, but it's like just kind of coming up as we're talking. One of the things that sort of disoriented me, maybe, when that first time I like tried to blend and really tried to hold intentionality, because I've had experiences before then where I could taste the potential of the plant, right? But this was like, okay, let's put all the container together and be intentional. And it met me, right? It really met me and was really healing and beautiful. But there was this quality of like when I've had bad trips before in the past, like this sort of mind state felt similar in a way of like where it was a negative experience. And I remember being in there like, wait, is this good or is this bad? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was sort of like having to ride with it and work with it, where like the healing emerged. And it made me want a little like, just like the mental space that gets kind of activated for me. I don't know how much that's shared for others, but there can be like it feels a bit wild in here right now.
Low grade paranoia or panic, anxiety, so these are stereotypical side effects of taking too much pot, right? Like you get paranoid, or you get, some people even have panic attacks on the medicine.
I've seen many friends when I was younger.
So again, those moments in the right container with the right safety and support are usually like the moments of dropping into these deeper spaces.
That was what I was kind of like, as we're talking, like, oh, I was missing maybe a lot of opportunities when I was younger, like that, not miss, but like that space is actually, I didn't know that space was a really healing space. I
or
just
you
thought,
just
like,
weren't in the safe container to do it.
Totally,
you know, like you can't do this stuff with hanging out with your friends.
Yeah,
you know?
not like at a party where you suddenly can't talk and you just got to sit on the couch and write it out.
You're just, what happens then? You get like a social anxiety and self-conscious, and then that loops and stuff. So one, you know, like you sometimes tweaking the blend can help with that stuff, and so a lot of the negative traits of overdoing it with the edible. You know, like you're tripping really hard, but it's a bad trip. You're throwing up, having panic, and you're paranoid. We can get rid of a lot of those side effects with the blends. So it might be a factor of your blends. It might be also you can take this nano encapsulated CBD, and that can drop you out of that anxiety.
And for me, this experience, like, as long after riding that initial wave of like, this feels like a bad thing I've known in the past, it was fine as long as I could relax, and I started to feel the healing that was happening, which to me always means like, oh, this is worth it. Like the state I'm in was very helpful, you know?
Oh yeah, super helpful. And your training, your Zen training, your psychotherapy training, a lot of great tools to engage.
Yeah, I had the tools, but there was a moment there where I'm like, this is really familiar to when it's been bad.
Yeah. So a symptom is something halfway out. So what if that was the trauma associated with smoking cannabis in unsafe places,
and like not always being respectful.
Or fear of getting caught and all that stuff. It all shows up, and so sometimes we have to move through those layers.
But one thing that I found funny that like afterwards I chuckled a bit was like, and I had a kind of I vow moment more with the medicine. Like there was engagement. It was more that personal deity like quality. And like almost feel like negotiating a little bit like, hey, can we be like friends with benefits? Like, can I still use you the way I normally do and then add this on? Or like, you know, I was like confused in the moment because it was like entering this sort of more psychedelic medicine space that I take very respectfully. I try to be. And then being like, wait, can we still just hang out? And it was like this tension point in the journey, which it's resolved. Many months later, like it doesn't seem to mind. Like
she doesn't mind at all.
She doesn't mind. But like if I say like, hey, I want to use you, I'm feeling the negativity or I'm feeling stuck, like it's gonna meet me.
She'll show up right there for you. So like she's like a goddess of compassion. There's also like a mother energy associated with cannabis, even on a molecular level. It's, you know, cannabinoids help with pregnancy things. But there's a mother energy, but not like our mother, but like the cosmic, universal, all compassionate, all loving, sacred mother who will do anything for you and trust you completely to know exactly what you need at any given moment. And she'll just say, okay, this is what you need. Here you go. You know, if you want to go play and surf, here you go. You want to go watch a movie, you need to relax some tension. Here you go. You need help sleep. Here you go. You want to have a full-blown DMT trip? Okay, here you go. You know, and so you just like treat her with respect in whatever context we use, you know.
Say a little, say a little prayer.
Say thank you so much.
Thank you. But like when you're talking now, these kind of two worlds, right? Like seeing her as mother, as spirit, and then also kind of the brain processes. Like, can you speak to holding kind of both those perspectives and what that's like for you?
You know, like so in the Hindu tradition, cannabis is associated with the masculine and Shiva, the capacity to discern and intellect and split and cut and
that blade like quality.
And like real crisp and clear, you know, like cognitive. And then there is this feminine associate, you know, so it's a plant and it's the female plant. Right, and we consume. Consume, and what we're consuming is a flower, and what is in the flower that makes it psychedelic is the nectar, and so it's a very feminine, you know, almost erotic medicine, right? Like there's something very sensual about it, and so as an archetype, the medicine can show up as like expressions of the divine feminine, the sacred feminine, from the maid mother crone archetypes, the high priestess archetypes, the lover and beloved archetypes. But then there's the polarity, the opposite of that would be like masculine, crisp, sharp, very clear and discerning, and that both are present with these medicines, or with cannabis.
So you're gonna get that sort of embodied, almost hit-based sensual quality, but you're also gonna have a clear, kind of crisp cognition that can meet that too at times, or you're gonna go between them.
You're gonna dance between them, or hold them both in a union of opposites. It's like a samadhi state. There's a
but when you're talking like that embodied samadhi, right?
Embodied samadhi.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere.
You're not kind of checking out from the body. You're like in the body.
You're more present than you've ever been, and in the body. But the body is like a universe of experience. It's like we tap into our cosmic self in this medicine.
Oh yeah, like I did yoga 10 years without cannabis, and the few times kind of exploring cannabis and kind of just movement. I wouldn't even call it yoga, but like it's like I don't know what I was doing before. Like there's an awareness of the body, like you said before, the fascia, and then also this element of, it seems the plant supporting the movement, like almost like that first night I was talking about with you, like I felt like I was being massaged by God in a way, like just like pushed in, like whoa, okay, we're going in this position now.
So that's that's your body knowing exactly what to do to resolve whatever it's moving through. The cannabis increases our somatic awareness, so we can perceive and feel what we need to know. So it's amplifying, that's endelic, it's amplifying the physical somatic awareness. And then it's also simultaneously relaxing the tendons through the endocannabinoid system, so you're able to move that stuckness you've never been able to move before.
And that's what I find really beautiful about the cannabis. Like those are my favorite experiences if I'm using it more intentionally. Like that
movement's so important. Deep.
It's like a different level of movement. But even the other day though, I was like, oh, I want a movement session, and I imbibe the cannabis, and then I was deep in a stretch, and I'm like, oh, I'm nauseous, and I was like, oh no, and then it was a purging session. So
you threw up?
I like sat on and like beautiful, like I was throwing up old stories, throwing up old beliefs. Like
so that's ayahuasca. That's just like peyote and ayahuasca.
I felt the same as purging in other ceremonies. And I had to like trust that it, like from your book, trust like, oh no, this is a healing thing. I didn't take too much cannabis or whatever. It was like, and like by leaning into it, it like really opens like what it could offer.
So remember, cannabis is an anti-nausea medicine, right? Like people smoke it to help with nausea and chemo and all of that, right? So when you get nauseous and with cannabis, it's saying, it's in the peyote ceremonies, they call it getting well, like you're purging something that was so stuck in there. That was the only way to get it out.
Like, sorry, you're not stretching this one out.
Well, then you go back to stretching after you throw up, you can breathe, like it's like it all goes back down to the breath and just breathe through it. But I help people throw up all the time in a good way. That's great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I know it sounds weird, but it's deeply healing.
It was good. It reminded me of being younger and all the times I probably smoked weed and drank and had the spins. And
that's the worst.
But being really healing, and then I feel so much kind of what's been helpful reconnecting to cannabis to me is like, I just wasn't given the supports when I was younger to know how to work with this stuff.
Right. None of us had that.
I was using those substances, and because you've spoken in your book to kind of feeling like a spiritual orphan at times, or I think,
I was always a little different. I grew up in the South. I was interested in like stones and crystals and nature, and I had big feelings, and I was like told
caring heart.
And I was told I had an overactive imagination, and I was just so bored in school. So I like lived in my imagination, and now those are the greatest skill sets I use all the time, and so I'm just naturally drawn to medicine work. I'm naturally drawn to what I'm curious about and what's under shit. And So, I never like and I was really deeply connected to wanting to be a spiritual person. Like I was raised Episcopalian and loved what, the outfits of the priest and all of that,
No,
but I had
yeah.
no connection to the actual traditions themselves. So I had to go out and look for what it was I was missing in my life.
Well, I'm glad you didn't have something and you had to find this. Not that this is all of you, right? But it seems like a big
It's a core identity.
core. Yeah,
It's a really
you.
core, like I'm a medicine person, and
Yeah.
like it would I would not feel complete if I didn't have medicines in my life. And that doesn't like be, and that's misconstrued as some sort of addiction or whatever, like but that would be the equivalent of telling people who are devoutly Christian they can't go to church anymore or something, like it's a deep identity for me.
And relationship, right? Like you're in relationship with the medicines. There's a
yeah. So like, I mean, again, like sometimes she shows up, as a personified being, and other times it's just a deep realization of the interconnectedness of all of us, and like being, having direct access with that. Also, like my life is better because of these medicines. Like I'll sit in meditation, I'll smoke a little, and I'll think about things in my life that need addressing. And it can be very practical. Like, what do I need to do at work tomorrow? Or I'm having this conversation with somebody. What are the key points I need to bring up? And I'll get I'll get an inspiration or an idea, and I'll implement it in my life, and it makes my life better. So it's really a useful tool.
So as we're talking about it as a tool, maybe just as we're winding kind of here, if you could just share, like, if someone wanted to explore psychedelic cannabis on their own, like how to move into that space. And then we've been talking a bit about it sort of back and forth, but like, what would you kind of suggest for someone that either wants to try psychedelic therapy and doesn't have access, or, is a regular cannabis user and wants to see what the other sides of cannabis might be?
Yeah. I got some resources on my website, Medicinal Mindfulness. There's a body scan meditation under media heading. So you could smoke a little bit and do the body scan. You lay on your back, find your contact with a gentle belly breathing, smoke a little more than you used to, and witness and allow, play some gentle music or something like that.
Right there, witness and allow.
Witness and allow, and just and relax.
Relax.
Like if you physically move a lot, it'll kind of shut down the experience. But if you relax in Savasana and let your body tremble or shake, that can just keep deepening.
Allow movements to happen if they want to.
Allow spontaneous.
Be still when you're able to.
Allow spontaneous movements to occur. But be still. Like if you feel an itch, don't scratch it, but stretching, sometimes like you did, like sometimes your body wants to stretch, just go back to Savasana and stillness afterwards. If like pick your favorite hybrid or pick your favorite sativa, pick your favorite indica, mix them together and smoke a little more than you normally do to get started. Play your favorite music. If you want to do journey music, that's great, but there's a lot of great music out there. And then my book, that's why I wrote it. It's called,
here, let me put it.
It's called Psychedelic Cannabis. And it's available on Amazon.
And you really offer a lot of practical sort of structure, I find, in that book. Like, here's how you can do this if you want to do this.
Yeah, just straight out. Here's how to set up the space. Here's the ceremony of smoking it with intention. Here's like 3 different ceremonies.
Yeah, here's how to hold your mind. Maybe here are some of the tools of awareness.
Skill sets. Here's some primary theoretical orientations to pay attention to. But the bottom line is smoke a little and stay with your breath. Bring awareness to your body and your breath and relax around it. And the other thing I tell people, if you're bored, sleepy, or not as deep as you want to be, it doesn't mean it's not working. It means you need to smoke more.
Consume a little more.
It's just so subjective. Like regular smoker might smoke a few bowls, a novice might smoke 1 or 2 hits. and they get to the same place. But so the novice, you don't want to smoke a few bowls if you've never smoked before.
Yeah, like you can be gradual with this. You don't have
Take
to
your
do it just
time. Yeah,
once.
you
You
don't
can
have
do
to
it.
start with a DMT trip for it to be very meaningful,
Yeah.
But yeah, I teach people how to do this. We have a program called Psychedelic Sitter School where I teach people how to do this, and we're getting back into groups. We took a couple of years off because of COVID and all of that, but we do this online. We do groups online now. People fly in and work with me individually.
Yeah. And so you help folks kind of offer this in their communities a bit, is the hope.
So we're coming from a model where it's no longer Daniel centric. We've got a lot of different facilitators, and they're starting their own communities and centers and other places. So that's
got to be really kind of beautiful to see in a way.
It's really fascinating and very inspiring. I feel, being part of a movement, like I really treat this as a part of a community movement instead of a business, and try to stay true to the vision of the medicine as much as we can.
And if you're speaking kind of vision and movement, like what's your hopes kind of going forward, just as you're a part of this kind of, I don't know what you call it, strand of a community?
Well, to be better recognized, like to be like my primary intention is to be an advocate for the plant,
to have more of an audience or more
ability to speak. That's recognized as a psychedelic medicine. It's time for it to come out of the shadows of the war on drugs and just say no and all of that. And then really I'm doing what I want to do. I'm teaching and facilitating these sessions. So just sustainability and regenerativity, or just how do we help heal the planet, not just settle for crisis. I think there's real potential for this medicine. I think, given the racial trauma that's occurred with this medicine, I think it's the perfect tool to help heal racial trauma as well. But it's, in some ways, it's still in its infancy, like the potential of what we could use these sessions for is really being cultivated in a good way. And I'm holding my piece to it, speaking to it, and people are taking it and putting it in different modalities and different settings, and it's really working, so
like in the way you sort of planted some seeds and now they're propagating in other areas.
It's kind of taken on a life of its own, right? Like and that's been nice, a little less pressure on me, so
it's you can relax a little
more. Man, I want to enjoy this. Like I smoke cannabis to really enjoy it, so I'm really staying in contact with that innate felt sense. What am I called to do? What brings me joy? How can I
like I want to help, but I want to be happy. All right, and I want to be and I want to be happy.
And I want to have time for my children. I want to have
enjoy my life.
So that's my intention, is just find that balance and breathe with it. It's nebulous to say the least. So
I feel that too in my own sphere. So I'll link to your kind of website and these offerings that you named.
That'd be great.
Any other offerings you want to share? Just kind of things that are important going on in your community?
We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this April. And so we're going to be doing some like online free stuff and gatherings and talks and stuff. So
cool.
So if people want to get on our newsletter, just go to medicinalmindfulness.org or psychedelicsitterschool.org, or just Google those. You'll find it.
I'll link both of those in the show notes. So folks can click on that there.
The community piece is really important, and we put a lot of effort in safe and sustainable community structures and things. And so it's a good community to connect with for those who are interested. A lot of us in the medicine community feel really isolated. So I'd recommend, just even if it's not us, joining a integration group, a meetup. There's all kinds of stuff out there now.
Be part of the community.
And don't be alone anymore.
That feels like a good suggestion. Don't be alone in it. Okay, Daniel, thank you, man, so much for taking time and talking.
Appreciate it, Brandon. Absolutely.
Hope we honored the plant. I
think we did. It felt really good to chat with you.
Okay, well, I'm gonna turn off the record. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Daniel and I. Yeah, I just want to rename my gratitude to Daniel for kind of helping me to expand my relationship to cannabis and something that can be playful and fun and connecting with friends or just something I like to do just because I like to do it. Now it has this other sort of healing dimension for me. And I feel like, you ever like have a friend that you like drop down to a deeper note with and you didn't realize that that was available? I kind of feel like that with cannabis now. Just like, oh wow, we can go there too. So yeah, please check out Daniel's offering. Check out his book, Psychedelic Cannabis, Breaking Down the Gate. Check out his community at the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness, and definitely try to tune in before April 18th to check out what they got going on for their 10-year anniversary. Okay, thank you very much. Hope you're well. Hope life is kind to you and kind of things are open up after this last couple of years of uh, being grounded, So yeah, be well.